Yeah.
I'd like to welcome everybody. We have a quorum, so we're going to start. It is 6:02. I'd like to first just start by welcoming everybody, especially our mayor and the parks director. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to put you at the front. As soon as we get the public comment, you'll be next on the agenda, so you don't have to stay through all the boring stuff at the end. First, our mission is for the Chuckanut Community Forest Park District to ensure the entirety of the property is protected in perpetuity in public ownership with respect to its ecological, recreation, educational functions, and to serve as a fiscal mechanism through which the district, by a tax levy, will pay the city of Bellingham back for the Greenways Endowment Fund loan. That has been accomplished, and we're in the final portion of our existence. We expect to sunset in September, and we'll be acting on that to inform the county we don't need an election for the coming year. At this meeting, they need that kind of head forward notice to ensure that we don't have an election setup that we don't need. The meeting will be recorded, and a visual and audio recording of this meeting will be posted on our website. If your camera is on during the meeting, your voice, likeness, and surroundings will be publicly available and viewable on the CCFPD website. If you choose to speak with your camera off or by calling in on a telephone, only your voice will be recorded. If you don't want those things to be present on the website or in the recording, please either call in or turn your camera off. Thank you very much. Welcome, commissioners and citizens. We are having this meeting in a hybrid fashion. You're welcome to join us at 1108 11th Street, Suite 303 in person or online through Zoom. I'd like to first have a roll call. I'm here. John Hymas. Please say that you're present and raise your hand.
Here.
Yeah, great, thanks. John McLaughlin. He is present as well and raised his hand. Hugh Beatty.
Here.
And Ed Grumbine.
Yeah.
We have a full complement of people. And the first thing we're going to do is to, we need a motion to approve today's agenda as amended. So I'd like to have each of our commissioners look at that. And if you please, a motion and second with additional discussion if needed. Have people had a chance to review the agenda, and are there any amendments or corrections?
I move we accept the agenda for tonight. As it.
Seconded. So Hymas moved and Ed Grumbine seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is to look at our minutes from March 22nd. I hope all of you have had a chance to review them. They are, as always, with Robin's detailed attention to detail, extremely detailed, and virtually a transcript of our meeting. So if anybody has any additions, deletions, or corrections, please let's talk about that now. When you finish your review, I would accept a motion and a second to approve those minutes if you think that's appropriate.
Move approval.
Do others have further need for time to review, or do I hear a second? Ed raised his hand and seconded, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Please raise your right hand and say aye if you want to approve the minutes.
Aye.
Take unanimous vote in favor of approval of the minutes. The next item on our agenda is to have introductions. The usual complement of commissioners is here. In addition, we have a number of guests. In addition to the mayor and Nicole, Lane Potter from the city is here, and Eisinger is here, and Ranjak is here, amongst others. So we welcome all of you and appreciate the time you've taken to come and join our meeting. We do want to have now a period of just a couple of minutes each for anybody that would like to make a general public comment. So about 3 minutes. Please just raise your hand, and I'd be happy to recognize anyone that would like to make a public community statement. I can't see everybody at once, so are there any members of the public? Vince, would you like to say anything?
No, thank you. I'm just here to observe and celebrate if possible.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And Gina, I know you're with the city, but do you want to make any comments?
No, I'm just here to help present. So I'm Gina Austin, project engineer with the City of Bellingham Parks Department. So I can just introduce myself.
Thank you very much, Gina. I hadn't met you. It's a pleasure to meet you, and welcome. Barbara Zilstra?
No, I'm just here to listen.
Thank you. Mayor Fleetwood, we'll give you more time if you feel you like, and but if you'd like to say hi now, that's fine too.
Thank you, Frank. I'll wait a moment.
Okay, thank you. Christopher Granis.
Nothing to say. Thank you.
Thank you,
Except
Christopher.
thanks to everybody who's put in so much good work on this issue.
Excellent, thanks. Lane, you'll be presenting. Any other additional comments you might like to make?
I don't. I'm actually not presenting. Gina Austin is going to be presenting.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming. It's good to see you again. Ranjak, we haven't seen you before, but we're delighted to see you now. Do you want to say something as public comment?
All right, as you suggested, I'll say hi.
Hello. Delightful to see you, Rand. Thank you. Ann Eisinger. Ann, it looks like you're muted. If you want to say something, we'll give you your 3 minutes, and we're delighted that you're coming to visit with us. Thank you.
Well, I'm just here to listen, and I also want to commend everybody for this long journey. And yeah, that's all.
Well, and I'd just like to acknowledge the great debt that we all have to you for your original study of the city of Bellingham many years ago that defined in many ways what the opportunities for preservation of land in Bellingham, actually what opportunities we had, and also for doing the initial baseline study on this particular property. Your input and your commitment to the community has been a huge service to the community, and sometimes those kind of services go unrecognized. I just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know many, many people feel that way, and thanks for joining us in this particular venue tonight. And if you, I just hope that you know we all very, very much appreciate all the work you've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Andy, if you'd like to speak up, you're the other person in the room, and you have 3 minutes to say whatever you'd like, if you'd like to speak now.
Thanks. Just want to say hi, and I'm just here to listen. Thanks.
Thanks very much for coming. So I think that's everybody that's here now. We'll move on from the public comment period. If I've missed anybody, please speak up.
How about me?
Oh,
Frank?
You're not the public, buddy. You want to speak as the public? Okay.
Well, I would. We had a Happy Valley neighborhood meeting a while back, and it was also a hybrid Zoom meeting. But Tiff Johnson just wanted to remind everybody how this all began. And I'm not sure if he was on the city council at the time or just paying a lot of attention, but he was back in the 70s. Anyway, at one point during a city council meeting, late at the end of this meeting, the zoning changed from urban or rural forestry to multifamily.
Yeah, 2 houses per acre up to 14 houses per acre. That was in 1980, I think.
Right. And there's no records left of that meeting or how this came down. And so that's what started all this. And this actually, started the whole Greenways movement. So anyway, we have some making up to do, which I think we've done over the last 10 years. And so I'm really looking forward to to this coming to a happy ending. That's my comment.
Thanks, Hugh. Any other people that want to make a public statement?
I have to-
Community comments portion. Yeah, Hugh.
Yes. I was in the room the night of that city council meeting and saw that thing happen. And I thought it was wrong then, and I said so. And it was a councilwoman named Roy Jones who was doing a change for a friend of hers, and he made a lot of money off of it. And that was wrong. And eventually we're rectifying the problem here.
Over 40 years ago.
Yeah.
There are consequences that are long-term over those things. Thanks, Hugh. Yeah, that history is actually fairly well documented. Anyway,
Really?
we're here to, if there is another public comment, I'd like to move on with the agenda. Thanks, everybody, for doing that. What we'd like to do is just to have there's one more report we have, and that is the Park Advisory Board meeting report. And we usually look to one of two people for that. And John Hymas, you're here. Were you able to attend, or have you received the minutes of that meeting?
No.
Okay. And I don't, some of our other members that usually attend that I don't think are here tonight. So I guess we won't have that report tonight. We can defer that to the next meeting. And now we'll move on to presentation by City Parks Director. We'll start. Nicole, can we start with you or the mayor, or where would you like us to start? And please, I'll turn it over to you for a presentation. And obviously, Gina, we want to welcome you and anxious to hear your comments as well. Nicole, I'll look to you though to start and to introduce the team and move us along, if you would.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, Frank. I'm really happy to be here. I was able to extend an invitation to the mayor once we knew that we were able to be on your agenda. We had a very productive meeting, ran Jack and Gabe from the Land Trust with Bob Carmichael and Alan Mariner and Lane and I, and made really some significant progress working through the conservation easement. And I'm feeling like we're really excited. So we wanted to also come, the mayor has a few words first, but we also wanted to let you know about where we're at with Herrera on the design and where we're going to be headed as far as the first trail improvements. And I wanted to share that with you so that you know what's going on and keep you in the loop on that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Fleetwood.
Thank you, Nicole. It's nice to be here. It's premature, but I'm finding myself moved tonight. This is thinking about Frank. I'd known Frank before 1996, but I got to know Frank well in 1996, and it was because of this project. Long time ago, as John pointed out, the history goes, as Tip referred, it goes way back. I'd love to know, out of curiosity, when that vote in council was, just for my own knowledge and awareness. But I was involved in Greenways, just on a personal note, in the 90s. And my dad ran into Frank James at the YMCA and said, my son's moved back to town and wants to be involved. And Frank told my dad, probably in the locker room or something, that, well, there's a group of us that are organizing the Interurban Neighbors to protest applications for development. And what was it called then? The Madrona Development Corporation, I think. And so my dad told me about that, and I called up Frank, and he invited me to a meeting, and it was a profoundly important just moment in my life. And the work that we all did, that this land was the inspiration for the second Greenways, which was the very first time we reactivated the Greenways program and started this precedent that's brought in, hundreds of millions of dollars, I suspect, if you think of the leveraged funds. So this is profoundly important in the history of the Greenways program in Bellingham. And I'm just really excited that we're getting close to a milestone, it sounds like. I just wanted to express my thanks to everybody for the progress that has been made. I know we all have a broad goal in mind in this effort, but I know there's been some disagreements and contention, and I know everyone is well-meaning. And I just want to express gratitude for everyone that stuck with it. And thanks for the Park District. When the city conveyed the amount of money that we felt was the responsible amount that we could spend for this project back in 2011, and said to the community at large, that remainder to pay off the interfund loan can come forward by whatever creative means the community comes up with, and you came up with this and made it happen and pulled it off. And it's really remarkable. So I just want to express thanks. I know that there was a meeting recently, and there's a lot of good work done at that meeting, progress made. Thank you, Land Trust, and thank you, Rand Jack, for that, and the Parks District and the city staff and everyone just working. And I know that progress was made. So I hope that I want to express support for that. And hello, Tip. So I want people also to know that if there is any funds, and I don't know if this will be the case or not, but if there are any funds that are left over in the Park District that come back to the city, they'll be put back into the Greenways fund and earmarked specifically for this property. So that's just an important thing I think needs to be said. So I hope there's support tonight for any revisions and agreements that were made, and commend this work. And I'm happy that this conservation easement that's going to protect this property in perpetuity, I hope that it gets passed and supported. And thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Seth, thank you for your kind words, and we really appreciate you being here. There's goodwill all around. Everybody at this table wants the best for our community. I mean, that's really clear. There are always sticking points. Right now, 70% of the dogs in the Chuckanut Community Forest are off leash. That's a threat to the wildlife there. I hope we can do something about that. We're also increasing conflicts between bikers and hikers, and there are bikers going off trail, degrading the forest. And that's another issue that needs to be addressed and can be addressed with some engineering features, which is a wonderful opportunity for engineering to come in and make a big difference. So there are some challenges, and we may not be able to solve those as the Park District, but I think with our partners at the city, I think we can begin to make great progress. And what the main thing we're going to hear about tonight, I assume, is from your engineer of the kind of the solutions that we're looking. Those hardline engineering solutions are really important because they make the kind of fundamental difference that doesn't depend on education, doesn't depend on enforcement. They're really hardline engineering solutions that can really solve many problems in the long run, I think, and keeping people on the trail and not making it wider, all the things that are necessary to preserve this property. A lot of that can be achieved through engineering. There will always be a role for education, and there may be a role for enforcement as well. As Skip likes to say, the triple E, education, engineering, and enforcement probably will all be needed. But Seth, the long history of your involvement in Greenways, I think, is recognized in the community as a real commitment to the future of our community. And we really appreciate your participation here tonight and in an ongoing way protecting our city. So thank you. Nicole, did you want to introduce your engineer, who we're excited to hear from?
Sure. And I also I forgot Ed Grumbine was at that meeting as well. Thank you, Ed. And I just wanted to mention that you were there too. I forgot you. Gina Austin is our park project engineer. She is extremely smart and great at helping to design and develop and maintain and fix just about everything in the park system. I remember Gina, when I first met her, she said her favorite part of her job is it's always changing. It's never the same every day. And so this is kind of a newer project, actually. I don't know if we've done one quite like this. It's very unique. And we've made some really significant headway with our consultant team. They've been extraordinary. And I also just wanted to say, Ann Eisinger, I've always wanted to meet you, and I'm really glad you're here. I've read a lot. I've read all your documents over the years, so thanks for being here.
Well, I want to say hello, Anne, as well. I can't see her, but I hear her voice. It was nice to hear your voice, Anne.
With that, I'll turn it over to Gina, who has a presentation to share.
Again, everyone, I'm Gina Austin, and I am your park project engineer. I've been with the city for over 20 years now. Nicole's correct. This is a unique site. So we're going to be adaptive. We're going to learn. We're going to listen. We're going to show you a lot of ideas. We're kind of at the beginning stages of getting phase 1 of the master plan, an understanding of it, and tossing around some approaches and really looking at the area. And that's what I'm going to show you in this presentation. So I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to get this to slideshow. My computer's lagging just a little bit. So now I'm wondering if you can see my screen.
We can't, but we have a technical fellow here who may be able to help. Richard, could you turn on screen sharing for our presenter?
Yeah, let's see if I can get it to toggle.
Screen sharing should be enabled for everybody.
Okay, great. So the green screen share in the bottom of the screen.
Yes, I'm gonna check out my, there we go. Let's see if that shows it. Does this show it?
Not yet.
Because I am sharing my screen and I am showing slides. So it says it's sharing. Let's see if we can try this again.
I think if you go to that green box, there you go. Now
you got it.
Are you seeing it now?
Yep.
Okay, so now are you seeing the presentation? Are you seeing like this? You're seeing the full presentation now?
We are.
Okay, great. Sorry about that.
Now you're on the slides themselves, so take it away.
Okay, great. So I think it's kind of a good beginning part here to remind ourselves, and I think you all acknowledge this, that we're all here out of goodwill and all have the same thought in mind about that we care about this place. And so I'm starting with just photos of just how we feel when we're in the park and we look at the trees, and it is a special place. And that's, I mean, before we even talk about the technical and the engineering, just acknowledging that it is such a beautiful treasure to be in the 100-acre wood, and that each tree has its own story, and it's just really a beautiful place. I always like to take the opportunity to dive into our photo archives to see what photos we have. The city of Bellingham happens to have one of the largest archives in the nation. And so I just wanted to see what we had around Fairhaven and 100-acre wood. And so here in this bottom corner, I have a little map, and this is just purely for entertainment. This photo's from the early 1900s. You can kind of orient yourself this way. I think this photographer is actually standing in the 100-acre wood, looking northward. You can see looking towards Cody and 22nd, the interurban line, and what it looked like back then. And then, of course, we have the old High Bridge to the very south that's kind of outside of the Fairhaven area. Another look at just the kind of corner there, looking eastward and seeing how the trees are growing up. And this is kind of cool. We had Jeff Jewell in our museum found this photo. Clarita Moore had a nice little cabin kind of off in the corner there of Fairhaven, or excuse me, 100-acre wood. And that's not Clarita, that's her friend, but this is her cow. And it was a retreat that was a while out there a while ago. So that's kind of fun stuff. And then, of course, you all know the city purchased the property with the help of the Greenways, the district, and the community. This are pictures of, looks like our staff. I think I'm in there too. We came in, helped relocate people off of the site, providing services, and then dismantling some of the structures and things that were in the site. You can see our sleds here. So we kind of treaded lightly while we were in there doing these projects. So now we get to today. We have the 100-acre wood master plan. We have a phase 1 scope, and we have some funding. And kind of the highlights of the phase 1 scope is improving the main trail, restoring hydrology. And this is a multi-phase, multi-year project. And I'll show you what phase 1 is and where these different items will apply. Installing signs and boundary markers and wayfinding, dog waste stations, trash receptacles, native plant signs in one of our education areas and the outdoor classroom. And actually the native signs and outdoor classroom are nearing completion. This is more towards Fairhaven Park. And this is a photo of that area. And those signs turned out really nice. And this is just part of the education component of 100-acre wood. So as Nicole mentioned, our design team was selected through a state procurement process on how we select consultants through qualifications. And Herrera was selected as the most qualified to help us out with the engineering and permitting. So their biologist, civil engineer is all from Herrera. And then they'll have support from geotechnical engineer, survey, archaeology, and hydrologists. You've seen this map before. This is the implementation map from the 100-acre wood master plan. And items 1, 2, 3, and 4 were highlighted for phase 1 work. And if I just put yellow over those, you'll see that is what the extents of the phase 1 work includes. However, when we're looking at the site, we kind of recognize that wayfinding is more broad-based. If we're going to have success in keeping people on dedicated trails and keeping people from creating new trails, that we probably want to advance wayfinding around the site to help guide people. I was joking with our group here because I was out at the 100-acre wood and I thought, you know, I'm going to try to run every single trail on this site. And I stopped after about 7 miles, ended up at some dead ends, met some people that were also kind of turning themselves around. I think people, for the most part, want to have some way of finding or some help through the site. There's also more trails out there than they're shown on this plan, and those trails will be decommissioned if they're not identified in the plan. This purple area up here was an area that our consultants were looking at as well. It's not specifically identified in the phase 1 as a high priority, but they were thinking that we could maybe reinforce the trail that is there and encourage people to stay on it and maybe do some additional plantings. So we were going to look at that area. And I'll show you what this all means, like what our ideas are and where we're headed with the phase 1 work, what it all will look like. So work that we've done so far is we've gone out to the site with the consultants, and most of them are very familiar with the site. We walked the site, we searched all of the data that we have. We kind of went back into the Fairhaven Highland files, found some old surveys, topography, and built up a base map and identified some areas where we really don't have any land topography, and getting the surveyor remobilized to pick up the contours in those areas. We've consulted with our permitters to talk about a permitting strategy and what we could maybe implement this summer, and what will be longer term permitting through our critical area ordinance, Army Corps of Engineers, and Fish and Wildlife as we look at restoring some of the hydrology. And then of course we had $650,000 that we got into this budget from the Greenway levy approved for this park site. So some design ideas, and I'm going to show you what these mean too in some photos, is in areas where we have hydrology that's cut off or erosion happening, we do have a design for a boardwalk that we've used, and you've seen the boardwalk that was built by Recreation Northwest, similar to that. So that's something in our toolbox that we can bring out and help improve the trail. We also have what we call the trail burrito, and it's, I'll show you what that means in a design, but it's really, you can place some kind of clear rock in a base and build up the trail a little bit, and that allows the water to move back and forth under the trail without really concentrating flows. We have ideas about rapid install wayfinding. The long goal here is to have this park have signature signage and really be a special place that will have educational interpretive signs that are unique to the site, but something that we can do in the interim to keep people from creating trails and to keep them really where we want them to go is get this rapid install wayfinding installed. And these signs can be changed out with graphics. They can be moved around or taken out when we finalize the actual signage and branding that will be specific to this site in the years to come. So it's more kind of temporary in nature. We also have an alternative trail section that we would implement at this site. Usually when we rebuild a trail, we would take the trail down to subgrade. We would import material and bring that trail back up. For this site, we want to tread lightly. We want to see where are there places that the gravel base is in place, and maybe we just need to narrow up the trail or provide kind of a thinner topping of gravel that's more natural and fitting in the area and not doing a major earthwork project. Our rapid install habitat fence is an idea that we can implement at this site as well, where we can decommission trails. And it's hard to see in this picture, but this is a Seaholm Arboretum. It's these metal poles with kind of this fabric in between and getting plants in there and then protecting the area so that people are not veering off the trail and they're really focused on the actual tread of the trail where we want them to be. And then we have our pilot wayfinding, and I'll show you what that is too. So Herrera has some just kind of renderings here and some ideas of how we can narrow up the trails and really bring back the health of the understory of the forest, and putting in this temporary rapid install fencing so that when the forest starts to grow up, that can be removed. Some ideas in natural barriers to guide people and keep them on the trails. This is an example at Samish Crest. We had some pretty muddy conditions, and as things get muddy, we call it the braided trail. And that's where people just keep veering off and finding the dry spot, and then that spot gets wet, and then they keep doing it, and it ends up with these really wide trails, and this isn't what we want. So at Samish Crest, we came in and we narrowed up the trails. We did some plantings. We also have another type of habitat fence that we install, but we guide people and we make it so that the drainage works, the hydrology works for the environment, and that we do have a desirable trail tread where people will stay on the trail. This is also an example at Little Mountain in Mount Vernon. I only show this because it was built by the WTA trail builders, where they come in and they don't use heavy equipment. And this is what we're aiming for also at the 100-acre wood. We don't want to come in with the big 600 excavator and just wipe things out. We want to use small equipment. We want to use power wheelbarrows, and we want to tread very lightly in the sensitive forest. And that's how these trail builders work, where they narrowed up a trail and then they have some rock that's placed by hand. And this is another part of Little Mountain as well, but these are some photos of the 100-acre wood. I don't think these will be surprising for you to see that we do have the braided trail. We do have a lot of muddy areas, and we're gonna make this better. We have the tools and the experience to fix these areas. These are just cartoon kind of cross sections that show our boardwalk designs. We have a boardwalk design that doesn't involve heavy equipment. And then of course I show the trail burrito. This is a little bit exaggerated, but it's just building up. This is kind of in the worst case areas where we would build up with clear gravel, and we would have fabric on top and bottom, and the water would be free to move back and forth. And then over time, these shoulders actually start to grow in, but the water still is able to move back and forth. This is an example of how we build the boardwalks. This is at 100-acre wood Recreation Northwest with the Diamond Pier footings. And if you haven't seen these installed, this picture is actually from the Fraser Street Boardwalk. It's handheld equipment. People walk in. These are precast concrete, and you set them in the ground and drive little pin piles in. So it's a very kind of low footprint construction method that works, where we can get where boardwalks are appropriate and let the water move back and forth. This is a much wider trail than I would ever want you to see, but I only show this because this is the trail burrito in action. If you've been to over by Haskell, we have a trail called Racine to Fraser, and that's because it connects Racine Street to Fraser Street. But what you might not know while you're out there is this is one of the largest peat masses in the city of Bellingham. So this whole area is just one big peat bog. We never found the bottom of it. So we've got to about 30 feet with a rod, and we never found the end, but it's very effective to build this clear gravel and then the trail on top. And this trail in this instance actually just floating on top, and it's been there for a while, but the trail shoulders start to grow in. The trail does not have to be this wide. This is just a major arterial trail. We don't really have the trail burrito in narrower areas, but they can function as a narrow trail too. But this is very effective, and the water levels staying high on both sides and being able to move back and forth and not cutting off that hydrology. This trail example up here shows our alternative trail section, and this is where we're just evening out the trail with a light kind of dusting of gravel, and over time that gets embedded into the gravel base below, and it just gives it a more even surface. But this is our low impact trail construction. We don't want to blow out areas that have a nice gravel base in place and lose all that good material. If it's working now, we don't want to dig it all up, but we would want to narrow it up. And there's some areas where we are going to have a bit of a trail rebuild. The soils are just too cohesive and clayey underneath, and we just need to build up a little bit, and then we'll have the shoulders grow in and it'll look more natural with some plants and things, and making sure that we can direct water so that the trail is the desirable place to stay. People won't veer off and create that braided trail situation. This is an example in Bellingham of a trail resurfacing project in Connolly Creek Nature Area. And this is where we didn't want to dig it out. We wanted to keep a nice narrow trail, and we just reinforced the trail with kind of a light dusting of gravel. We also have other things in our toolbox here too, how to narrow up a trail with natural features like logs and rock barriers, plantings, and that rapid install habitat fence until everything starts to grow up. And then in some areas where we need just the bigger reinforcement, especially in the future phases where we're going to have some wetland work and enhancing and reconnecting some of the hydrology in the wetlands, we probably will have our cedar fence that's a little bit more permanent, but still in the semi-permanent stage. We have a family of wayfinding signs in our system that we will likely implement as a pilot project at 100 Acre Wood, but these signs can be changed out. So once we have an identity and graphics and something that's unique and special for 100 Acre, these signs can go back to the sign shop and get a new graphic and come out. And so nothing will be lost. We probably won't have a lot of these larger wayfinding areas throughout the park. These would probably be at major trail intersections. And then we have some standard graphics and signage about encouraging people to stay on the trail and tread lightly. And these can be interchangeable. And we can also incorporate other kind of education graphics. This is at Patton Creek. So this is after the habitat fence gets a chance to weather a bit, kind of blends into the environment a bit more. Another idea that we have for 100 Acre Wood is in some of these trail restoration areas, creating and engaging the public with our photo areas where you can track it over time, and you can watch the forest grow and kind of be a part of that process. And this is when I say rapid wayfinding earlier, this is what we mean. These signs are interchangeable, and they're pretty easy to install and then move around if we need to with the correct tools, but they're pretty low impact. And this is Whatcom County uses these plastic wayfinders. They also call them reassurance markers. So if you're deep in the forest, you might start to think, well, maybe I need to veer off and take a shortcut back. But if you see the reassurance marker, it's going to reassure you and tell you you are on the trail and you only have 0.1 miles to go to get out, so that you maybe would be encouraged to stay on the trail rather than trying to make your own shortcut. State Parks uses these three-sided markers. They're very narrow, but they are effective in just pointing and giving people a direction and a place to go. So early implementation for this summer, some of the stuff that doesn't take extensive permitting is the rapid install wayfinding, the habitat fence, some of the trail decommissioning that's identified in the phase 1 and plantings to go with that in the fall, and some of the minor trail resurfacing where we don't have to do rebuilds. The remaining phase 1 work that takes a little bit more permit review would be some of trail reconstruction areas where we do need to build up a little bit of a base to get the trail so it's resilient enough for the foot traffic, the boardwalk construction, and mitigation and restoration planting is phase 1 future work that would go into summer 2024. And that's only because of the time it takes for the permitting agencies to review. And we've gotten feedback from people in the community, people that have institutional knowledge of how the wetlands are connected, as well as our own team, to make sure that we're not just picking any mitigation, but really meaningful mitigation that is specific and going to provide the best restoration for this site. We're also wanting to ease the public in a bit about what's going to happen, so they aren't surprised and show up one day and find that their favorite trail is blocked off because we're working. So we're proposing to put in information signs at each of the entrances sooner rather than later, so that people have a chance to adjust, call us with questions, and know what's coming. I know if I was going to a park to find respite and I showed up and there was something happening, it would be nice to know ahead of time so that I could prepare or pick a different park, or maybe come and observe, watch what happens. So we are proposing to put these signs in so that people know what's coming. This is a very messy drawing, but I only show this because it's progress. So this is our consultants now taking that phase 1 map from the master plan and putting all the engineering notes on it and making notes about where do they see the water going and where's the gravel good and where are areas where we need to reconnect, and how are we going to decommission the trails that are identified, and also dealing with the trails that are showing up that are new, that aren't on any maps, that have just been created. We've got to deal with those. So zooming in, we're trying to be really thoughtful about this too, because going out and just decommissioning a trail might push somebody into creating a trail just far off to the side. So we need to make sure that the fencing, the plants, that everything makes sense, that the wayfinding guides people, and that we really are encouraging people to do the right thing so that we can restore this area and make it and keep it, I guess, the beauty that it is. And that is my presentation. So that's a lot of information, I admit, but we're doing a lot and it takes a bit of time to get it right.
Thank you so much, Gina. That was a wonderful presentation. We're delighted that the consultants you chose were the same people we chose. They have our confidence, as do you, with this presentation. I really appreciate it. Lots of good information. I had a couple of just technical questions for you, and then we'll open it up to other people too, if that's okay. But it was identified by Herrera that one of the main wetlands was actually subdivided into 2 wetlands in the past, when in fact it's actually just one. And I wonder if there's thought of making recognizing that's a single wetland. It actually makes it a bit larger and might have some impacts on trails. So I think it's important to do before we get too far down the planning phase. Is there a thought about that, and how will that go forward?
There is a thought about that, and there's also some evidence as some community members have brought forward, and you can see in the surveys of previous property owners ditching areas to
Right.
drain them. And that's where the meaningful part of the design comes in, where you go out and we're going to look at it, and we're not just going to pick any mitigation, that we're going to focus on those areas and see how can we make that really the best, the health for the health of the forest. So definitely looking at that. That might be a future phase of work too. Really, it would be great to just have multi-million dollars and go out and just do it all at once, but we're going to do it in phases. But part of getting there also is decommissioning those two trails that head towards that wetland that looks like it's been bisected, but just doing it in a way where we're going to get the public to just follow along and really asking for their help to just not go that way. So it is going to be baby steps, but yes, we do acknowledge that some of those wetlands will benefit from enhancement and really getting everything back and connected.
I guess my specific question was, will it be recategorized as a Category 1 wetland? That's the real question. Because if it's categorized, there's a difference in how you manage that property, as you well know, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is a Category 1 wetland. And it is a continuous wetland, but it seems like that would be a good thing to recognize at the beginning of the process.
Yes, and the wetland biologist is coming in, so the wetland delineations have expired in time, but they're coming in and looking at those corners. But the way it's categorized and the enhancement and the buffers and seeing where it goes in the future is all kind of those little steps that way. So does it make it a higher priority in the process? It probably falls in the same, priority that's shown in the master plan, but we are so far off with people actually just walking through the wetland. The first step would just be to get them to stop walking in the wetland. Then the next step would be enhancing, connecting, and then watching these wetlands flourish. Through the monitoring period is where we would start to pick up and see, is it functioning how we want it to be? And then it's if it got delineated in the future, it could get bumped up for sure.
And I admire your willingness to even consider the undoing the ditching. When we look at that, that's a big project. That's a really big project. So I'm glad you're going to consider it. And it would be very beneficial, I think, if it were done, but we understand there are challenges and barriers there too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your presentation. Would you be open to questions from other people as well? Would that be okay?
Sure, I'm open to any questions. I thank you for putting us on first. It is game 5 tonight of the Kraken versus the Avalanche, but this is a very important project and there's plenty of time before that game will be over.
I'd just like to thank you. Great presentation. We appreciate your work and the work of Herrera, and look forward to working with you between now and the end of September.
Well, and I also want to reiterate, there's a lot of collective information and institutional knowledge. And so never feel like, oh no, I'm going to email them and it's going to bother them. Email or call, talk. We already have another site walk scheduled with a community member to talk about institutional knowledge. So their institutional knowledge. So we are a work in progress, and we, benefit from all this information too. And we have a good team. I really believe in the team.
You are a wise person. Thank you so much for that invitation. Other questions? There's a lot of people here who are very experienced and have deep knowledge. Any questions or comments? You did a good job if there's no questions.
I think we have
I
two.
think Christopher Granish has his hand up, Frank.
Christopher, great. I didn't see
And
that.
John McLaughlin.
And
So
John
Christopher,
McLaughlin.
how about you first? What do you got, buddy?
Christopher, will there be park boundary signs at the edges, at the park boundaries?
That was included in the phase 1 program, is to have those park boundary markers go in.
Just a brief comment, there is a park boundary sign that got picked up and put over near the wetlands, and it's about 10 feet off the trail on the left-hand side, just before you go that big messy intersection in the middle. I don't know who did it or why they did it, but it definitely is inappropriate. So, but thank you for getting on that. John McLaughlin.
Thank you. I have a whole slew of questions. Your presentation was very fascinating. It sparked a lot of ideas that I have. First, I think your rapid wayfinding signs look great. They'll be very effective and they'll help. I myself have directed a lot of lost people on how to find their way back. So those would be really helpful. My first question is, are there opportunities for public or volunteer projects? I take courses of students out there at least twice a year, and I take them to the ditch I think you're referring to, and every single time they ask, can we fill this? And I have to bite my tongue because I don't have the legal authorization to, but if it's part of a project, you could use volunteer labor and leverage your resources to much greater effect.
That was a big topic when we were walking out with the consultants for the first time, was what could we kind of just peel off as a volunteer project. So they are definitely looking at that. And it also creates, happiness in somebody doing something good. The part about the ditching too is complicated because it's a point in time. So that is a kind of a heavy permitting challenge that would be deferred to the next phase or future phases. So I know a lot of community members have walked out there and looked at it and said, if I just do this one thing, it's going to help. But it's all regulated. So that is a bit of a long-term goal, but there's still the opportunity for volunteers, definitely.
All right, what I suggest is I have sources of lots of volunteers who are very eager. Students would much prefer to actually make a difference than to sit inside and listen to someone like me lecture at them. Lots of this.
So John, can you email me too, or maybe I can get your information?
Certainly.
John has a map of all the trails that are on the property, for example, that he and the students recently made that you might find helpful, because they actually found all the social trails, which I think might be a useful document for you to have. And John, could you send that to her too when you send your email? Thanks.
My next question, I noticed on Herrera's concept trail, the trail details, that the trails you're planning on putting in have 6 foot width with a crushed limestone surface, and then 2 1 foot shoulders on each side. We've had a lot of community feedback suggesting they don't want trails that wide. And so I'm really concerned to see that in Herrera's documents. And if you're planning on that trail standard, I'd be concerned of basically not cementing, but with a firm limestone surface, reinforcing a much wider trail width than is really appropriate for the place.
Yes, the 6 foot trail widths that you're seeing in their plan is for the main trail. So right now the trails could, is 10 to sometimes 20 feet wide. So it's narrowing those up to the 6 feet. And then over time those trails will start to grow in a bit. But that shoulder reinforcement is still there. So if we're bringing a power wheelbarrow in, or like the Cushmans that we have, those little electric dump vehicles, that they're not going to blow out the shoulder of the trail. Those areas still get grown in, but definitely like the secondary trails and the future phases of work, I don't think you would want a whole monolithic of just giant limestone trails everywhere.
So you do have a different trail standard for the secondary trail?
Well, right now we're just focusing on phase 1, just the phase 1 trails. Yeah.
Right. My next question is related to that. Many of the photos that you started the presentation off with showed pretty extensive areas of compacted soils that have been denuded with vegetation. And so Those are results of not people being lost, but people following the actual trails but widening them. So I'm wondering, what strategies do you have to narrow trails that are inappropriate wide, including trails that should be secondary trails, but right now are functioning as you mentioned, even wider than the primary trail standard?
That strategy is the rapid install fence with the plants behind the fence. So in an area where there's a little bit lower trail impacts, we have other types of shoulders that we can create, but we think in this area, because that understory is completely wiped out, that we're going to have to come in with the rapid install fence, which is just, the metal signposts or T-posts with the fabric, but that we would also have the education component go with that. So on the fence would be a sign, and then you're looking beyond the fence and you're seeing the tree or the understory there, that whole thing would go together. In some of those areas, that fence is going to extend because we just don't want people to create the trail around it. So it's going to be an effort, but we're hoping that the encouragement of the fence, the plantings, and the signage is going to keep people on the trail and keep those narrowed up until they start to develop up and grow.
Great, thank you. Then related to that, do you have criteria on which you'll decide when to remove those fences?
We don't. That is more kind of adaptive and like a contingency plan. Is keeping those up, seeing how the trees grow, seeing how things work out, moving them around. The other challenge we're going to have too is trying to get the understory to grow in the canopy. And this has been an extensive project for us up by Cordata, where we're trying to transition from a deciduous forest to conifer forest, and just getting the conifers to grow in that shade has been very challenging. But we are finding that just attacking it with overplanting and planting and then they start to take is really the approach that works.
Okay, all right, two more. First, you mentioned lining some of the trails with salvaged logs. And I'm wondering where those would be sourced, because logs are generally habitat structures that can be really important. And so depending upon where you source them, that could cause degradation elsewhere.
Yes, that's a good question. We haven't quite gotten that far on that to figure that out.
I mean, some of the trail construction, particularly for mountain bike structures, have involved sourcing logs within the forest, which has displaced many sensitive wildlife and that sort of thing. So I'd be concerned about repeating that same thing. All right, my last, so that'll be to be determined. My last comment, I guess, is you suggested you'll be consulting with people with local knowledge. And I would suggest people on this commission and others, in this meeting have a lot of local knowledge and care enough to be royal pains for the Parks Department. We've made life somewhat challenging and frustrating for them, and that's because we care about the place so much. And so I'd suggest tapping into that resource.
Yeah, that's a very good comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other people with questions, if you'd raise your hand.
Tip has his hand up.
There we go, Tip. Yeah.
So,
Yep,
is
please.
it possible for me to share my screen very briefly? Because I want to get back to this contiguous wetland thing.
So I think, Richard, is that possible?
Yeah, you should. I know I'm not Richard, but you can share your screen, Tip.
So the green in the middle of the bottom, there should be a green box with an arrow on it, Tip. And if you click that, you should be able to share your screen.
We'll see if I'm sharing it. So
Yep.
this is
There you are, yep.
this is an exhibit from a long time ago. I don't know if I can even, oh, yeah, I can scroll around, but you know, back when we were doing it, and I spent some time looking at this and like the topos and stuff, it's like, this is a contiguous wetland. Like in the driest months, water is coming out like in high places. It's like coming from somewhere. And like over here, it all drains to Padden Creek. And over here, it all drains to Chuckanut Creek. And it's kind of unique. And I don't know how far I can share my screen, but you know, I remember like we spent our money to prevent this from happening, you know, and this is not terribly exaggerated. This is what was proposed on those topologies in that contiguous wetland, and we stepped up and did it, and then we, you know, but here we are down at the beaver pond. We should get some beaver down there. That's what I want to say. But we got let's see, I think we can do this one. No, we can't do that one. We can do this one. But you know, in these waters are these like publicly owned wetlands adjacent to the project site abound with these tiny shrimp, shown here 60 times actual size. Amphipods like shrimp are an important part of the food chain, but very sensitive to pollution. Their populations will likely be decimated by the toxicological impact of development. This will deal a harsh blow to local creatures reliant on anyway, I mean, now I don't know how to not share my page, probably, but I'll try. Oh, here we are. I want me to turn somebody hold me. Oh, stop share. Oh, yeah. So, you know, I know we're going to have some trails. I've on record, I want a major trail from Fairhaven Park down to the end of the interurban because I want a bridge connect the interurban, and that's going to be the gateway to the Chuckanuts. So let's just make that happen. And the rest of them, I think it's like in drawing, like you make architectural drawings, you've got a line weight hierarchy, and like the same with the trails. You should have like some trails, big trails, heavy trails, and some light trails. So I'm all for that. I hope it all works out. I just think this contiguous wetland is really the key to the whole thing, and preserving that and making sure that that water coming out of the foothills and boiling out of the ground, feeding Padden and Chuckanut Creek, and supporting the foundational food chain is our main priority. And you know, let's make that happen. Thank you.
Ann Eisinger, I'm glad you had your hand up, and please ask whatever questions you like, Ann.
Yes, thank you, Frank. Gina, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very informative. And I just have a very basic question, and that is, just from a wildlife perspective, the trail density as you presented still seems to be a bit high. Obviously, this property is not just a human recreational site. The humans share it with the resident wildlife and the transient wildlife. And I'm not talking about homeless people. But anyway, so is it possible, and I'm sure that you and the consultants have thought deeply about this, is it possible to remove more of the trail systems or more of the side trails away from the wetlands and create more of a network of well-developed trails and yeah, just eliminate the smaller side trails?
I'm trying to share my screen again. I can share it. It's just, I have like this double screen situation. So it's trying to pick a screen.
There you go.
Are you seeing it? Okay. So that's likely going to happen when these get decommissioned between two. And there's actually more trails in here. There are more trails, as you all know, than are shown on this plan, right? So the plan itself includes that note that all trails that aren't on this shown on this graphic, because there's just trails created all the time, those will be decommissioned. But the first phase of trail decommissioning is this section, and this section. But over time, I think we are all gonna see is that we will have more of a forest experience. We will have narrower trails, and that will get the habitat and the forest to thrive in those areas that have been matted down. So I think that really is the end goal, is to create the meaningful trails that people want to stay on and use. They're encouraged to do it with some signage and new plantings, and that we do see this forest and understory come back, and that it's enjoyed by all and the creatures that live there.
Gina, I think when you look at John's map of all the existing trails, there's a trail within 75 feet of every single place on that, which is, Anne could probably comment on this, but I think that's incompatible with wildlife meaningfully occupying this site. So I think it would be a priority to decommission the trail system and the other question is, how can we help with that? How can we, as both the park district now, but as citizens later, assist parks in sharing that message? Can we do public relations outreach? Can we do in-park kind of docent educational pieces about it? Can we help create signage or kind of academic pieces, if you will, that might inform people better? If there's ways we can help with that, we are very anxious to be of assistance with that issue, because it's frightening to us, because so much of the wildlife that's there is precariously there, and a lot of it's already been chased off by the off-leash dogs are a big deal, especially given how frequently that's done right now. So it's really concerning to me personally, at least. But just keep in mind, we're your ally and your friend, and we want to help with that. Nicole, you've got your hand up.
Hi, I just wanted to respond a little bit. I think this is one of the core things that we grappled with so much during the planning process is, what do we do first? It was like, but there's so much to do. How are we going to decide what to do first? And so what I think the effort that we're trying to do first is to really focus on those main, and I think we took a lot of comment that hydrology down the center is the one piece that we added, where it's really the most beaten down and opened up. And when you start with the main route, that's where most people will go. And then it will give us, once you have the main route, then it's going to be much better and easier to block off and obliterate as we go. And we are definitely going to be having many volunteer work parties to help with this effort. We obliterate trails all over the place. And I'll tell you what, one of the biggest things that happen is that people open them back up again. So if they don't have a good way to go, sometimes we try and block a trail before we create another way to go, and it does not work at all. So San Juan Boulevard is a great example. So I think by starting with the main trail and the wayfinding, we're going to be able to have much better luck at all of the trail obliteration that needs to happen. And that will be happening over time as we implement the plan. But we're going to do some of the major ones first with the help of consultants and permitting, because it's going to be quite a bit of planting. It's going to be a pretty complicated permitting too, if that helps.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great perspective to share with us. It's helpful. Thank you very much. Anne Isinger?
Yes, if you don't mind, I'd like to follow up on my comment. And thank you, Gina, for your response, and Nicole as well. My greatest concern on that site, we have, from a wildlife perspective, we have the larger mammals and small mammals that can move, terrestrial mammals, so to speak. But we also have a concentration of amphibians. around the wetlands and in the wetlands, depending on the season. And the one thing that I think is lost in the conversation when we start talking about trails and trail management is the fact that the amphibian population has to transit across the landscape. They aren't strictly in the wetland all the time. They move on a seasonal basis from the wetland to the upland and back again. And those populations are really dependent on safe passage from the wetlands to the upland and back again. And that's why my concern around trail density in association with the wetlands and the upland is a concern. Bikes, hikers, dogs, whatever, can disrupt that movement and actually cause mortality in those populations. And then the other thing is with regard to the wetland health and maintenance, to have adequate buffers to keep people and dogs out of those areas as well.
Thank you, Anne. John McLaughlin.
Thank you. Following up what Ann just shared, the Chuckanut Community Forest is one of the few places that in the city that actually retains those forest wetland connections. When you lose them, it's called habitat splitting, and you lose amphibians. That's why there are no longer amphibians in the Seafoam Arboretum. It's because we've severed the connections between their wetland breeding sites and the forest where they spend most of their lives. So retaining those connections would be really important. Over time, we have been losing the amphibian distributions in the Chuckanut Community Forest have been shrinking. And that could be due to recreational impacts. It could be due to shrinkage of climate change or shifting hydrologies, and a number of things could be going on. And so the success of both your trail decommissioning work and restoring wetland hydrology is going to be really important. The thing I would suggest is following up on Nicole's comment about, what do you do first? And in your plan, decommissioning those 3 north-south connections crossing wetland JJ are really important. Those are really problematic trails, and for both hikers and for recreational users and for the non-human users of the place, because they do incur into some really sensitive habitats, and they are mostly wet places. And so they cause all kinds of problems and impacts for people wanting to keep their feet dry and not so muddy. But they also provide really important connectivity in the trail system. And so if you're going to remove those, then people trying to get from one place to another are likely to do the very thing Nicole described of trying to recreate those trails, unless we have really clear signage that provide people clear alternatives so they can get to where they want to go without having to recreate those very trails. So I applaud your priority in removing those trails first, but having signage even before that is probably going to be critical.
And that's definitely what we want to do this summer. I mean, I'm sure you all have done the same thing. I've been in that forest so many times, and I still stand there and think, where exactly is the trail? Is it here? Is it there? And so this signage is really going to go a long way, and the fencing to guide people.
Thanks,
Well, if
Gina.
there's no more questions, I'm gonna go have dinner with my family because I'm in Palm Springs on vacation.
I was wondering where that sunshine came from.
I know.
I don't see it here.
I wanted to not get out of the sunshine for the last few minutes of it because it feels so good, and I'm sorry, but It's 100 degrees down here. It's really nice. But I
Thank
just
you,
wanted to thank you for having us, and good luck on your conversation this evening. And I will have my phone with me. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I will pay attention.
We'll try to do that when you get back.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Nicole. You
Thanks so
bet.
much.
John Blesson, did you have a question?
I got a quick comment, and that's that now that Padden Creek has been freed under the freeway, that we actually have much better habitat connectivity, and I hope that in future phases we take advantage of animal migration from the lower Padden Gorge all the way up to Padden Lake, and it needs to be integrated into this plan. We need to see this forest as being a piece of a much larger project. And that's one that's pretty exciting. I don't know if we'll ever see fish, but we certainly have a way for animals to get onto the freeways safely.
And under Chuckanut Drive, you know, that's another culvert project down there that comes directly into this area.
Yep.
Thanks, John. Other questions? I know Gina probably wants to get to dinner with her family too. So, and the mayor gave his a nice. He sent me a note and thanked us for being here. He had to go to not to dinner but to another meeting. Are there other questions for Gina so we can maybe let her get off to dinner with her family too? Gina, thank you so much. Your presentation.
Thank you.
I was going to say, Gina, maybe in about a year from now, we could all get together and kind of evaluate how it's going, you know, with all the signage and trails changes and stuff. We wouldn't even have to do it on Zoom.
Thanks, you. Were there other questions for Gina before she heads off? Well, thank you, Gina and Mayor Fleetwood and Nicole. I know you're gone, but you're very much appreciated. And Lane, you could take the message for us if you would. You're still here. But we very much appreciated the excellent presentation and the useful information. I do think there's undone work. I mean, we still really need to work even now. The number of dogs that are there off leash right now, I don't know. Ed was doing a survey separate from me, but what I've seen is around 70%. I don't know, Ed, was that kind of what you've seen too? So most of the dogs in the forest right now are off leash, and this poses direct and immediate threats to life and well-being of those animals we were just talking about. I mean, they see them on the trail, they chase them. They're off trail, they chase them there. It's a major impact. It's against the law in the city to do that. I hope that we can get some enforcement or at least some education early on that we really need to turn that around. There's still people biking off trail essentially in these little trails that are steep, and they think that these are adult children we're talking about that are going places they know they shouldn't be, kind of misbehaving and thinking it's kind of funny or fun. But we really need to do what we can before we sunset to be good stewards of this land, and we need to do whatever we can to both of those things are having a worse impact now than they've ever had in the 25 years that I've been working to preserve this land. And these are important issues. So I guess I'd like to move our agenda along. That was an excellent presentation. It's wonderful they're working with Herrera, who's providing some excellent material. Thanks, Lane, for being here.
Thank you all.
Yeah, and I'll move the agenda on, and thank you, Gina, too. I didn't know you were still here, but thank you so much. Yeah, and thanks for listening to everybody and their concerns. I know you got the wisdom of Solomon to split all these things up and pick out the most important things to do first. And we'll we'll tell you what we think is important, but also understand that it's a practical thing that's resource limited. I'll move on then. Unless other people have comments, we'll move on then to some of our other business. We do have some other things.
Jack has his hand up.
Who does?
Rand.
Oh, Rand, please, Rand. Sorry. I think you're on mute, Rand. Just
most
yeah,
people appreciate it when I'm on mute. First, I'd just like to commend all of you for the work you've done to protect this property, and I think that the future looks very bright for it. I was impressed by the presentation tonight. I would just say that the conservation easement is not a strong conservation easement. It's an easement that grew out of a negotiated process, and there are all kinds of things that I would like to see in it that are not going to be in it. But I think it's pretty good, and I think that the real future of the property depends on people like you. I think that you need one of the things that's been most impressive, my long-term trashing around with these things, is that Stimson Nature Reserve, there's been created an ethic of caring for that property. If you walk there, you'll hardly ever see a piece of trash on the ground. Dogs are forbidden. At first, I saw a few dogs. I'd never see dogs anymore. Bikes are forbidden. You don't see bikes there. And that's because there was an ethic created that the people that love the land there, and we've been able to, that's expanded to a wider and wider group, care for the land and make it happen. And I think that that's really your next big job, is to get involved with the park and create that ethic, so that people will care for the 100-acre wood in the same way they care for Stimson.
Rand, could I ask you a question? One of the other communities of interest that we talked to about the conservation easement was the Lummi community. And I know you guys are working with how to work with the local tribal communities on your other properties. And I just very much would like to invite them into this process. At Northwest Indian College, they've got a group of people that they teach stewardship, basically. It's part of the educational process at Northwest Indian College, some of the classes that they do. And they're really interested in becoming and becoming involved with the 100-acre wood. It has headwaters that go into 2 of the 3 salmon streams. There's a third drainage too that goes down into Chuckanut Bay as well, directly into that marsh that is one of the only high quality saltwater estuaries that support fish as well. I'd love to talk more with you about the possibility of how we can involve them in this process. They're respected and powerful people in our community. The city respects them. They've done a lot for our community in terms of stopping the coal port and in other stewardship efforts. And I think they're sensible long-term partners. So I'd really love to maybe have a discussion with you more about how we can involve them in the long run as stewards. When we were working on that coal port, it was interesting because the doctors, I organized all the doctors and we were working on it. And basically the doctor said, if we lose, I'm going to move. The tribal people said, we're not going to lose and we're never going to move. I mean, this is their home. When you talk in perpetuity, they're here in perpetuity. The rest of us are going to leave, either through attrition and death or going someplace else. But I really think it could be part of the bigger discussion you're having with them. And I think that the people that I talked about there are very, very thoughtful, informed, eager to have a presence kind of in town where they could talk the kind of stewardship that they really believe in terms of salmon habitat. And if there ever were beavers back in that beaver pond, we need their approval to do that. The way the rules work is if you're going to put beaver somewhere, you got to have the local property owners know they're going to cut down trees, and you need to have the tribal participation as well. And I think Tip mentioned it, but I think it's a very important goal to keep enough water there over the season, particularly drying. I think recreating that beaver pond is an important thing. A male beaver ended up in Hoag's Pond recently, stayed there for a few months and then left. But they clearly there's pressure for him to come back, and that could be expedited with some. I've researched this. We've researched this a little bit, putting in some low dams that would bring water back, that allow the beavers to live in that area and then recreate their own dams. But just no reason to respond now, Ram. But I'd love to have that conversation with the land trust about how we could involve them as stewards. You folks need stewards for your land. And I think the Lummi community is interested in doing that, particularly the young people at Northwest Indian College.
Forgive me, Frank, I'm going to interrupt rudely and just say it goes back to the contiguous wetland that drains both to Padden and Chuckanut and to the bay. And it's producing water at the driest times of the year. It's coming from somewhere, and it's a foundational element that really needs to be respected and preserved. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. At any rate, if you consider that and let me know what you think about it, we can maybe further that discussion. We don't need to do it tonight, but just wanted to plant that seed.
Let me just say a quick word. The role of the land trust with the conservation easement is a passive role. It's not an active stewardship role. On the property that we own, we're active stewards of that. That we're making the kind of decisions about replanting and how to stop destructive practices and things. And so what I think it's a great idea to get the Lummies involved, and I think it would be that there are ways to do it, because what you're really describing is a very active role, and I think that it goes back to the kind of things that we're talking about Stimson, where you get people if they're present there and working there, and I think that the respect for the Lummies and the Nooksack has grown, changes, earth-shakingly changed in the last 10 years. But I think that I think it's really Nicole that you need to talk to. I'm happy to talk, I'm happy to kibitz, but I don't want to create false expectation, because we're not going to be, the land trust does not, for instance, we have work parties all the time on fee properties that we own. We don't have work parties on where there's a conservation easement. And I think what you want is people on the ground. I made a suggestion with the signs that you could have signs saying the Lummies want you to pick up your waste. And I think that there's a lot of room for it, and I'm happy to talk about it, but I don't think that the conservation easement is the path for that. It's far too passive.
The reason it came up a long time ago was 2 cedar trees had been stripped as if someone was collecting the bark for weaving. I talked to both Lummi and Nooksack about it, and they don't strip trees like these were stripped. This is some non-native person doing it. But these are good-sized cedar trees that were killed by stripping the bark. And the Lummies and Nooksack, I think, have an interest in making sure that they are not seen as doing that, because that's not the way they do it. They do it in a way that spares the tree. But I think it's just again, I appreciate your clarification, and we'll seek more counsel with the city about that directly then. Thank you, Rand.
Well, and I'm happy to talk.
Yeah, great. Ann Eisinger, you have your hand raised, and it is such a joy to hear your voice. I want to recognize that right away and say, speak up.
Well, I'm sorry I haven't been more involved in this process, but thank you, Rand, for discussing Simpson and the model, the ethical model that's been used there. I think that's a very, very important point, as well as the role of the conservation easement in the land trust. One of the things that I recommended in the baseline study, and I can't remember if it was edited out, there were so many iterations of that document that I can't remember what was left in and what was taken out ultimately. But one of the things that I felt very strongly about was a recommendation that I had made for a stewardship program that would be developed by your group before it was passed on to the city, and that it would be an active role on the part of your organization, the Metropolitan Park District, that could carry on. In other words, if there was some way of working that into the management plan for the site, that there would be a stewardship group that would have an active role in the land's management over time, and also provide activities, engage locals in management and oversight on an ongoing basis after the sunset in September, or whenever that's going to be.
Well, that's something we should definitely consider, Anne. That's a good suggestion. We do have resources. We don't have a lot of money, but I think if we do need to provide some money to the land trust as part of a risk pool that would be involved in legal defense of the conservation easement. But beyond that amount, there is going to be some additional funds that we could allocate to such a program or such an effort. And that's something I think we as a board should, we probably not at this meeting, but at a future meeting, we should definitely discuss further. Rand actually made some very similar suggestions, some very creative ones actually, that we also, I think, will need to consider going forward about what we're going to do in these last few months that we have. And those are very valid and appropriate concerns. And to build a model that would embody those ethical principles that Stimson so well exemplified, and perhaps to involve other partners that may share those values.
I think that when we met with Nicole and Alan and people the other day in the meeting that was referenced, Nicole expressed a very openness to having a citizens group that would be actively involved in doing it. And that's what my first order of business, if I were you, would be to sit down with Nicole and start figuring that out and exactly what form it is. She was concerned about if it was a docent program that the city had to administer, that would create an administrative burden on the city. But I don't think there's any reason why you guys and girls couldn't start a program and begin to organize the kind of not just docent in the sense of helping inform and guide people, but I would call it a docent / stewardship organization that would take on some of these, maybe go out in the dark of night and fill in one of those ditches.
Are you saying you're not really interested in the conservation easement, Rand?
Pardon?
Are you saying you're not really very interested in the conservation easement?
Tip, what I think he's saying is that we've gotten all we're going to get from the city, and it's pretty clear. We've been as direct and forthright and as earnest as we can be.
I heard him say that they don't take much action on these kind of conservation easements. It's kind of a passive role, and maybe you guys should take it.
That's what I heard him say too, that they in fact
like
have
a citizens advice, like the purchasers advisory committee or something, like the people that bought it. Like, is that what you're saying, Rand? That maybe the conservation easement should be held by somebody more interested than the land trust?
No, that's not what I'm saying. A conservation easement by definition, and the use all here and everywhere, is that it is a role of stewardship and oversight. I wish there were more hard lines in this that says if you do this, then you violated the conservation easement. I think that whoever you put in that role is going to have those limitations. Not limitations. I wish that there were more clear bumpers that if you bump into this, you can't do that. But I think that there's been a long history of trying to build a stronger conservation easement. The land trust holds over 100 conservation easements with the city, with the county, with farmers, with private owners. on my land, and that's the role that we play. A conservation easement is not it's an interest in the property, but it's not a fee interest. It doesn't, that organization doesn't take primary responsibility for the stewardship. There's a set of rules, and it takes primary responsibility for saying whether the rules have been violated, and if so, to take enforcement action. Unfortunately, long before the land trust got involved in this, the park board had tried to negotiate much tougher guidelines or requirements, and it hasn't worked out. The legislators got involved. We've negotiated a few changes that I think make it a better conservation easement. We came into it. I mean, when the park board signed the original conservation easement back at the beginning, a lot of the horses were out of the barn.
Yeah, so I think what Rand is saying in a very polite way is that we don't have a powerful conservation easement, and at this point, it's not possible to get a stronger one. And what is being suggested, I think, is a very pragmatic thing, and that is that we try to have a good volunteer effort within the structure of the city's stewardship, and I think that's a wise and prudent path. So other people have their hands up. I'd like to recognize those folks. Vince, I don't know who was first, but actually Barbara, perhaps you were first. Barbara, would you like to make a comment, or you're on mute?
I just see the role of involving volunteers in setting the tone is really important. It has to do with ownership. If we involve more people there to see the impacts and people start to care about it, like Stimson. You know, it's a really good, I argued that we should treat the 100-acre woods in the whole master planning more like Stimson. You know, why do we have to have dogs there? Why do we have to have bicycles everywhere? But that wasn't going to be. But I do think volunteers and some kind of organized stewardship will grow that feeling more. I mean, we have it, but we've got to reach out, and that has to grow in the community more so that people don't want to destroy it.
Yeah. We need to understand that what they do can destroy it. We need to, there's education and there's enforcement, both we need to do. And we can do the education piece, and we can create it. We're going to have some money. We can help to create an organization that can do that. Christopher or Vince?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm what Ann said, that yes, in the draft baseline study, there was section 7.2, monitoring and stewardship, and it's the whole 3/4 of a page. And then 7.3 was master planning. And in the final draft, 7.2 is master planning. Section 7.2 is master planning, and the whole conservation stewardship, monitoring and stewardship, I mean, chapter is removed. So Ann is correct in how that happened. That's all I wanted to confirm.
Thank you. Christopher?
I have heard a few things about the conservation easement, what is in it and what isn't in it, but it's not clear to me. Can you explain all that? What happened at the meeting that the mayor and Nicole and the city attorney and Rand, what happened at that meeting, and what have we got? Is it time for celebration or for mourning?
I mean, I wasn't at the meeting, but I'll tell you what I think happened is that we do not have a conservation easement that speaks to bicycles. We do not have a conservation easement that speaks to enforcement of the city's own rules about dogs. The city has a law against bicycles going fast. They've got a law against dogs being off leash. And what they've said is they're unable to enforce those rules in this setting. That's a political thing. We can lean on them politically to get them to try to get them to enforce these things. They believe, for example, anything that's enforcement, they can't even right now enforce the laws about burglary, about property crimes. And this isn't a high enough priority for them to elevate that. That's just where the city finds itself economically and just the reality that, at least that's what I heard them say, that they're unable to enforce those laws that they already have in place in this location. We do have some money. I've envisioned that we might be able to assist them with that, at least through September, to kind of set a tone that there would be enforcement about, for example, dogs being off leash. That's something that hasn't been realized, though. That's aspirational. We did get some things through Rand's efforts to clarify and did make progress, but not the progress that we'd hoped for. So we did make improvements. The city isn't going to give us anything more, I don't think. We're looking for the final draft of that. And Bob can comment on this, but I don't think we've received it. Maybe we have received the most recent draft, but that's still an open negotiation process.
Can I comment on that, Frank?
Can I just say one thing?
Oh, yeah.
If I disappear suddenly, it's because my battery went out on my computer and I don't have the cord with me here at the office. I came in here, so in case somebody showed up, I'd be here at the office to meet and greet them. So if I disappear, Ed Grumbine, could you take over the meeting and run it, the rest of it, if I just disappear all of a sudden? Because it's not willful. I'm just running out of electrons.
Well,
So-
I'd have to get the agenda on another screen. How much of an agenda do we have remaining?
We have other old businesses, the conservation easement current status, which is what we're talking about now, the PR and education, kind of where the elevator speech is, we'll update that after this meeting, I'm sure. And the dissolution, we have a vote to take on that so that the county does not put an election in place for next year. So we have to formally say we are going to dissolve by the date we've already agreed to resolve, which is, I think, the 21st of September, as I recall. And we have to pass that tonight and tell the county so they don't set up an election for those of us that would need to go up for re-election. And then there's routine.
Frank,
Yeah.
Frank, you could just go into the public meeting area on the other side of the door and participate from there.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I can do that.
I just like one clarification.
It seems like the rest of our agenda is discussion of various points. The critics might be to make the vote that we have to do when Frank is here, and then do that now, and then just go back to finish the agenda.
If I can just jump on the other computer, I won't have the electron problem I'm talking about. So I'll go out and just jump on that other computer and use the microphone. That should work. So I'll do that. So I'll remain as the chair then.
John McLaughlin has had his hand up for quite a while.
Following Ed's comment, why don't we table that and take care of the vote first?
I would just like to make one small clarification. The land trust owns Stimson. And so we dictated the rules.
Right.
And we have a management agreement with Stimson. We sold the city a right to use it for recreation within the management plan that we designed. No dogs, no bikes, no fires, no off trail. And so that's a difference.
Yeah.
That's the difference that makes a difference. And we need to be realistic about what our room to move is in 100-acre woods with the city as the main manager.
And I think you need to talk to Nicole and say, I think that the most important thing about this meeting is come out of it with a spirit of cooperation and mutual support.
Mm-hmm.
And take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Rand.
It's your business.
So
I think I can conclude that if the question is, did preservation make it in the priority over recreation and the conservation? The answer is no.
I think there's a balance. I think there's it certainly did not make it in as the triumph. It made it in some language about how it would be managed, but it did not make it in terms of prohibitions. You cannot have dogs in the park. You cannot have bikes in the park. And that's what you can enforce in a court or in an arbitration in a conservation easement, when you have specific rules that say you can't do. There's a whole section of what you can't do. And that section is not, when we came into it, essentially, this organization, the city, negotiated that balance, and the land trust was not able to change that balance. What we did is we brought some clarification. So there are places where we have the power to enforce, but before we got involved, those things were so mealy-mouthed, they basically said the city can do whatever it wants to do. And we said, no, there's some rules, and if you violate the rules, we have the power of enforcement. But it's not a strong conservation easement. It's not something like that we would have designed if we'd had the authority like we had at Stimson.
Why is the door closed to strengthening the conservation easement before the commission dissolves?
I can respond to that, being at the multiple meetings. The city is not going to change the terms of the conservation easement to satisfy prioritizing the kind of management that we have been discussing here. It's not going to happen. And so we can't expect the conservation easement to lead conservation in 100-acre woods going forward. Whether we like that or not, that's the politics, that's the reality. The door to stronger conservation, all the pathways lead through the city. Hence the partnership comments that some people have spoken as a consequence of the meeting tonight. And so for people like us who are pro-conservation, we have to work with the city and gain strength toward protection through that work. And that applies for a docent program, volunteer work, and the particulars of managing trail decommission, and virtually anything that happens going forward will happen or not happen in partnership with Parks and Rec.
Okay, what about making a contentious public issue out of the purchasers of the property having preservation interests that aren't being met by the city, and you know, fomenting like interest in a citizens advisory committee of the purchasers? You know, it was a specific district that paid the money, right? And notably some of the poorer neighborhoods of the city. And you know, it's like, I think it could be made an issue. And could that be, I mean, I like the, like, let's all work together and the milk and honey and all that, but what if it's just about like being kind of pushy and saying we got to have no dogs and bikes?
So Tip, let me answer that question, and also your question, Christopher, because what's being missed here is the historical perspective. And everybody has come at this from their own perspective. Everyone has had their own reasons for supporting this, the creation of the 100-acre wood. I would say most of the people on the line tonight have a single-minded focus of preservation. That is not what the city had from the beginning. And there are people who voted for this park who wanted a place where they could have their dogs, not off leash maybe, but have dogs walk through the forest, even ride a bike through. There's definitely, it's a classic contention between different forms of recreation. One of the purposes of the park was recreation, in addition to preservation. When we negotiated this original conservation easement at the very beginning of the park district, the city said, we're not going to have a conservation easement over this property. They weren't going to have one at all. And in the course of discussing with them why they needed to have one, they gradually came around to having a conservation easement, but they've been consistent on one thing. And that one thing from the very beginning has been that the people bought this property, all of the taxpayers did. There's some people who might want to use it for one purpose, others want to use it for others. They were dead set against drawing the kinds of lines that Rand was talking about in the document. And had those been insisted upon at that time, we wouldn't, in my opinion, we wouldn't have had a conservation easement at all. And now you could go back and say, well, maybe we would have been better off having the battle at that time. That was not the choice that was made by the parties. And I kind of view that as water under the bridge. I would say that since that time, we have made improvements in the conservation easement through, I think, about 7 different drafts of it. Before the land trust got involved, the land trust added some that helped as well. The last little piece that we got was the city agreeing to add the provision that hadn't been in there before until just this very last meeting, to call it a nature park. They said that this was at our request. This was a function of some of the requests that the land trust came in with. The land trust came in with the request for a docent program. City didn't like that. There were some other things they didn't like. But in the communications that they said, well, you guys don't have to worry. This is gonna be managed as a low intensity nature park. And so at that last meeting that we had, we said, okay, we'll put that in the conservation easement, the statement that it will be managed as a low intensity nature park. And they agreed to do that. So that is something that was added recently that I think is an improvement. Does it bring it up to the line of having a conservation easement with clear prohibitions on things like dogs off leash? Well, actually, they were willing to have something like that, but the land trust said, you know, we're not going to be enforcing that. So that went out of the conservation easement. But there are there's nothing to prohibit bikes in the forest. And I don't think we would have gotten anywhere had we pushed that. If you want to talk about trying to take this on from a political angle at this point, I think that what we would end up seeing is the biking community coming back in to this, as they did in the master plan, when they submitted something like 400 emails saying that you need to have bikes in this, and the city responds to that kind of political pressure. And I think that if we decide to back away from this, I truly believe we'd be setting ourselves up for failure. And I think that what we should do, frankly, is along the lines of what Ed Grumbine said. I think Ed said it pretty well, working within what the park district is offering. And one of the things that Nicole didn't say, but is in her letter, is that they are going to have a stewardship program for this park. They do invite people in. So she has set up a structure within within what they're going to be doing in managing that park, so that citizens can come in and play a stewardship role, probably as much as they want to. And she specifically invited people that are associated with the park district to come in and do that. And they would run that. I think what she was concerned about with the docents was having a separate organization running a program. They want to run the stewardship program. They are the owners of the park. They're the managers of the park. So frankly, it does make sense for them to run the stewardship program. And you know, if they don't do a very good job, I'm sure people will let them know about it, but the institution is set up for that to work and to have something developed, developed at Stimson and ethic. I think the thing that Rand said to me that resonated the most was the land trust owns Stimson and they could write the rules. And we never have been in that position. And the city's known that very well. So I think that what we have to do is, if we want to accomplish some of the things that have been discussed, be active in the stewardship program for this particular park and help create that ethic.
And I think that the reality is if you start trying to challenge things at this point, you'll lose that opportunity, because I think that one of the things that came out of that meeting that I was most impressed with is Nicole's sincerity about wanting to make this a place that where nature's protected and wanting to involve people in helping that to come about. And I think that you don't want to jeopardize that opportunity, because right now I think you're at the high point of goodwill in the last few years in terms of dealing with the city. And I think you ought to grab hold of it and make it work.
You?
I would like to remind people that on page 5 and 6 of the conservation easement, there are restrictions on use. There are 16 of them listed. And some of them are quite essential and pretty good, you know. And we went through this and revised it and improved on it over time. And, you know, it's not the greatest thing, but it's if they do any of these 16 things wrong, we can get them. We can raise a big stick. So I'm you know, like subdivide the property in any manner. They're not allowed to do that, you know. They can't do any residential, commercial, or industrial use of the property. They can't have motor vehicles except as necessary for development management. They can't build or place roads or buildings of any type. They can't harvest, cut, or remove trees or vegetation except as allowed pursuant to Section 4, which we have little thing in there. But there's plenty of stuff to look at here and keep them honest on. So just keep your conservation easement copy and refer to it often.
Thanks, you.
I haven't seen the latest on that. How can I get one?
I guess you could get them from Bob Carmichael. I don't know. Or maybe Robin would make them.
And Robin and all the commissioners have them. So where this stands right now is we have an iteration that came out of the last meeting that we've talked about from the city that was sent out on April 14th. Rand then asked for an adjustment, additional language that would inform the land trust as the holder of the conservation easement when the city completed its environmental review and signed off on whatever they were doing, which is something they had agreed to at the meeting, but in Alan's draft, he didn't have that in there. So Rand said, remember, put that in. And we got an email from the city attorney, Alan Mariner, today that said, okay, I accept that. And so what we have is probably in one body document, the April 14th version is going to be the version with that one addition that I mentioned that Rand suggested, so that the land trust would know when something was signed off on the city on a city project. I think that's where it stands. There's not really one document, but between maybe the April 14th version and Rand's email and Alan's email, we have a document. All somebody has to do is accept the red line revisions and put that one sentence in, and we would have agreement if everybody is agreeable to it.
I'm ready to celebrate then.
John McLaughlin, you had your hand up, you had your hand up and been patient.
Well, the board has to agree to it. You know, this is something that Ed and I were involved in at the meeting, and we're representing the board. But one of the, so I think one of the last, probably the issue that remains is what happens to the Park District's money, to the extent it has any left after it pays over stewardship funding for the land trust in the assignment. How is that? How are we assured that those funds will be spent on the 100-acre wood? And we have been assured by that in a letter by Nicole. And one of the questions will be, is that satisfactory assurance for the Park District to accept that, or do we want something more?
According to what Seth said extra funds will go to the Greenways Fund.
That's right. And that's what Nicole said in her letter. That's not a legally binding commitment, though, Vince. No. And so the question is, what do we need, if anything, more than that?
I would just like to say that John McLaughlin has been very patient tonight.
Yeah, he has his hand up.
I've been trying to call on him, but I don't think his microphone's working.
My microphone's working just fine. So thank you. I volunteered to hold my comments because I thought we were going to take a vote on whether the Park District continue need to hold an election, all that sort of stuff, but no one else has been following by those rules, so I guess I'll throw my comments in now. First, I think Rand's comments about the role of the conservation easement, the potential opportunities for the Park District and all that are right on. We ought to heed them. He also, I think, is right about the weakness of the conservation easement. And I think we would be better, we would be more effective in trying to secure a better future for this place by focusing on our role, or the role of people in the future in managing the place. As he said, the park owns the property, they manage it, and that's really what we're concerned about. The conservation easement provides limited measures for influencing management. In fact, I'm not convinced at all that a statement about managing for low intensity nature park really is going to do that much. That's pretty much what we have now, and there's been progressive compaction of soils and widening of trails and sacrificing nature for recreational playgrounds. We're, I think, really not talking about making nature a priority over recreation. I think what we're really talking about is ensuring both. And what we have now is dominant use or unrestricted use of either. And when you have that, then the dominant use takes over, and that's what we're getting. So what we're looking for is some kind of measures to contain the recreational impact so that there is wildlife habitat, and there is restoration of plants and hydrology and everything else. For that, I think if we can get involved in supporting the Park District in management, I think that's going to be our best option. And towards that, people have talked about a number of things. I think what we really ought to consider is what happens after we dissolve. Right. So we've, again, as Rand has argued quite compellingly, that using the conservation easement is going to maybe help with egregious violations, but with the current city administration, we're pretty confident that's not going to happen. And so what we're really talking about is more positive roles for people to get involved in restoring the place and in helping other users to recognize its value, to follow reasonable guidelines, and to participate in restoration. And so if we could think about the mechanisms, whether it's a docent group, a restoration group, or something in which we could provide the resources, the leverage, and the local knowledge that would complement what the city and its consultants have, I think that is potentially a very productive future. And there we can be working with the Land Trust, we can work with the Northwest Indian College, the Lummi Nation to the degree that they're interested in, and certainly with the Parks Department. And if we do it in a supportive way and help them do what they do, make their jobs easier, I think we'll get a positive reception. So I would encourage us to think about basically a transition. Where can we go from here? After we pass on the easement, do whatever we do with those funds, which could involve funding this other group perhaps, then what happens to us, to the people involved, even if we're no longer officially a park district? What's the best role, the best opportunities to continue to restore this place? Thank you.
I think that John's absolutely right, and that but don't discount the language that Bob got inserted that said it will be managed as a low intensity nature park. Legally, that does not have any particular effect because it's too vague, it's too general. Politically, you can use it as a lever. You could go to take that to the city council and say, wait a minute, this is what you said right here. You signed this conservation easement that says that's the way you'll manage it. And you point to a specific thing that they're doing that is destructive. You said, you're not living up to it. Mm-hmm. It's a political lever, not a legal lever.
Mm-hmm. Better than no lever at all.
Right.
I'd like to say, I'd like to thank Bob, our legal advisor, for all the time, these 10 plus years, and what you guys accomplished at the last meeting is really impressive. If I go back to Tip, wondering about things, if we had maybe started working on these issues a year earlier, it may have made a difference, because basically we've run out of time and before we have to dissolve. But as I recall, we had a lawsuit that took up several years, and then another year of messing around digging up old records and stuff for somebody. But anyway, I think that what John McLaughlin was talking about, one idea I would say right off the bat is there are always an opening on the Park Board Advisory Committee and Greenways and other board memberships. So especially if we can get some people younger than us interested in keeping an eye on the 100-acre wood, there you have it. I'm done.
But we do have, is my microphone's working now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, great.
You have to talk with it close to your mouth.
Close to your mouth. Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Bensa, you've got your hand up.
Well,
I do want to move us on here pretty quickly, though.
Well, yeah, I just want you guys to vote on accepting that conservation easement if that's what you intend to do tonight, and also to vote to let the county know that we're dissolving in September, and have like a clean a clean closure and then, you know, give the extra money to the city, you know, as the mayor said, towards greenways or towards parks or however. And then we can really work on stewardship and, you know, volunteering and supporting the city. And to Tip's point, it's too late to argue, otherwise we lose the whole ball game. So we can't do that.
Hugh? And then Barbara.
Hugh, you're muted.
I would
hands up. Yeah.
I'm unmuted now. I would suggest that we form the Chuckanut Community Forest Neighborhood Association. And then we can monitor the whole thing from all the different neighborhoods that abut the 100-acre wood. And we can raise funds, we can do whatever we want. And that would be a good lever there. Because like, remember Tip, when we did the Connolly Creek Nature Area and how the neighborhood association has really helped on that over the years. You just get people involved that way.
Barbara?
Well, I just was going back to something Seth had said tonight. And that was that any monies that are left would go to the greenways, but be earmarked for the 100-acre wood. So it was going to, that's the intent. So I think we'll have some funds that the parks can allocate for the 100-acre woods.
At the very least, you need to get that in writing from Seth.
Yeah, yeah. Good point. Yeah.
I'll work on that.
We got them on tape. We can always.
Go ahead. What? Okay. I feel like we had a pretty robust discussion of this. I'd like to move on to the rest of the agenda, if that's okay. One of the items on that agenda is going to be to talk about the what we've already started to talk about pretty extensively, and that is the final version of the conservation easement. So that's moving on to new business. I think we should do that while Rand is still here, and also get Bob and Ed to make a presentation about it. I would encourage us not to vote on that tonight, but rather to have time to think about that and bring it up for a vote at the next meeting. I think it's a great piece of work. I don't think there's a great deal of urgency to move it forward tonight, and so I'd like to have us give us time to think about it more. But let's do that right now. So new business, the conservation easement. Ed, you are our official representative there. Would you like to summarize any additional comments you might have about it?
I don't have much to add other than what Bob has already mentioned. I would remind the board that the latest draft with the latest changes is in our emails from Bob. All of us should have been able to read it. It's been there for days. It's not a clean copy, but it's clean enough to understand. And I agree with you, Frank, that there's no urge, rush, or need to vote on it tonight, especially if all the board members haven't had a chance to take a look at it yet.
Rand, did you want to make any further comments about it?
No,
I
not
appreciate you
really.
being here tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say thank you for letting me join in. And I hadn't planned to say as much as I said, but that happens often.
I do have something to remind people about the conservation easement, the way it's written. You know, it's a legal document, so sometimes you skip over some of that parts of it. One of the things to keep in mind is the way it's written. It's a document that will be signed by the city and the new holder of the conservation easement, which presumably will be the land trust. It will not be signed by the park district like the first one was. So the order of action, the action items really will need to be the park district assigns its interest in the existing conservation easement to the land trust. And the city then will approve the new agreement with the land trust signing as the grantee, not the park district. But the land trust has also been very clear with the city from the beginning that they will not sign a new conservation easement that the park district does not support. So that's why it is important, I think, that the park district take a vote on the easement, so the land trust knows that we've accepted it, and then we can authorize a signature on an assignment of the easement to the land trust. And I think that we're not in a position to really do all that tonight anyway, except symbolically, if you wanted to have a vote, you could, but I tend to agree with what's been said. That's not necessary. The other thing I just want to really emphasize, and Rand's already said this, is that Nicole's enthusiasm for having a good, robust stewardship program at the Chuckanut Park was palpable at the meeting. I have never doubted her sincerity. She is sincere now, as she has been, in my opinion, about wanting to protect this park to the best extent she's able. And she does have a lot of other things to deal with that we don't have to deal with. But I was convinced on her sincerity, particularly about wanting to bring people into a stewardship role and to have that set up within the park department, and inviting all that energy and all the ideas that we have into those roles. I think we've got a perfect institution set up to do that right now, that can work. And if it doesn't, then obviously there's other things that can be done through citizen involvement and incorporating groups and that sort of thing. But I do think that she does want to set up this stewardship program, and that she really means it. And I think it'd be a good idea to take her up on it, frankly, because I think with the energy in this group, you could really make a difference in building that ethic of making sure the wildlife is recognized, and people don't leave their dogs off leash, and people are careful if they're riding through to stay on the main trail. That's the sort of thing I think that really can be accomplished with citizen involvement. And there's more than one way to do that, but I was impressed that Nicole was thinking about it and wanting to make it happen. And she made that very clear at our meeting. And it's also clear from the letter she sent.
So with that, I'd like to just ask Bob to give us a clean copy. There are several different additions and corrections that need to be made. If you could get that to us, we could then consider that in the intervening period and vote on it at the next meeting.
I will do that, and I'll send it first probably to the land trust and the city. I'll generate a new document and get them to basically say, yeah, this is it, and then bring it to you with that background that yes, this is it, and the land trust has said so, and so is the city. At least
if you could send us a copy before you do that, that'd be helpful, so we can be thinking about it too. I presume there won't be further changes, so if you could send us that copy before that process, I'd appreciate it.
Happy to. Yeah, I will do that.
Yeah, thank you. The education and kind of community PR piece. This is a effort that's really led by Christopher and Barbara and Vince. There was a kind of the elevator speech that Ed started. I was waiting to finish that until we had some resolution of this. I can work on that and bring it forward at our next meeting or before our next meeting, certainly. And I just wanted to ask for a brief update of that volunteer committee of concerned citizens of Barbara, Vince, and Christopher. What do you, are you been working hard?
Frank, Ed wants to say something.
Ed, sure.
I apologize, folks, but I didn't know the meeting would go this long, and I have a call coming in from China that I have to get. So I have to leave the meeting in a minute, about a minute or so.
Thanks, Ed. I don't think there's any other critical vote things that are going to take place. So if you
Yes,
need to
there
jump
is. We have
off-
to
Yes,
vote whether we
we need-
continue.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of you have to vote for the dissolution of the district under new business. That has to happen by all of
Why
the.
don't you do that now?
Does it need to be all of us? Is that a legal requirement?
They ask that all the commissioners vote on it. That's what the auditor's office, I don't know that it's legal, Bob would have to say to that, but that's just what they told me.
There's nothing legally required about any of that, but it is being requested by the county auditor, and they're trying to save.
Let's just truncate it and vote on it then. So do we have an actual language for the resolution? Lacking that, I think somebody needs to move that we're going to, let me get the.
It says in your agenda, quote unquote, the Chuckanut Community Forest Park District will dissolve before or by September 21st of 2023. That's what's on the agenda.
Yeah.
And that should be the motion.
I had a question, Bob, about that. The city actually sent us that letter on the 16th of September. Why is it the 21st?
That's the deadline.
Well, no, it's a year.
I thought it was a year too. I haven't, frankly, I haven't gone back and checked what the discrepancy between the 16th and the 21st. I would have thought it was the 16th as well.
I was puzzled by
Well,
that.
they said the 21st in the letter. That's the only reason I put the 21st, that they said the park district would dissolve by the 21st.
The letter that we got, as I recall, from the city was dated on the 16th of September.
That's right.
I wouldn't want to get it wrong. So I realize
think that letter,
like that's right, but it isn't right in my view.
Yeah.
Or at least I need to confirm that with Bob for sure.
Yeah.
If we vote, we're gonna lose Ed.
Yeah, just vote.
Just vote.
We could just change the language to September 2023 and not worry about a specific date right now.
Well, if this, can I say something here? If this letter came from the auditor, this whole thing is illusory anyway, frankly, because you could vote today and then next month say we rescind this vote. So it's ridiculous in my opinion, but let's just do it because the auditor wants us to do it. This is their language. Take the vote.
And so we can use the auditor's language. So
Yes.
I'd love a motion to that effect. Who wants to make it? Only commissioners can do that, by the way. Is there a commissioner who wants to move that? I'll read it for you. The Chuckanut Community Forest Park District will dissolve by or before September 21st, 2023.
I support that motion.
Ed
I'll
moves
second it.
and McLaughlin seconds. Further discussion? Call the question, raise your hand and say aye. If you say
Aye.
Unanimous, great.
And for the record, whoever put this up on the screen, it does show that this was what was in the city's letter to the park district. It was sent, I believe, on the 16th, but it says no later than September 21st.
Again, so the purpose of this is so they aren't obliged to have an election set up that we have to pay.
That's
for.
right.
So this is an important thing financially. We've discharged our duty. It
That's
says
right.
on or before we're covered. Okay,
Yeah.
done.
Thank you. I better go because
Thanks,
I got
Ed.
a call coming in.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Ed.
You bet.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Ed.
Thanks, everybody. I'll see you in a month.
Yeah.
Hopefully before.
Yeah.
So we're down to old business, and I think we've covered that. We have a couple things there. So we're down to other old. Is there any other old business we haven't addressed tonight? Hearing none, I'll move on to the monthly expense and cash flow sheets. Petty cash, we've got $2,617.11. Treasurer's report, we have a beginning unencumbered balance of $257,889, ending unencumbered balance as of 252,290, and received rack tax revenue of $1,037 and paid $6,649 in operating expenses. That's our petty cash and treasurer's report. I'd like a motion to approve the district payroll form. Robin Albro, 23.25 hours in March of 2023, total gross $581.25. Do I hear a motion and a second to that effect?
Move approval.
I'll second.
Moved by who was it?
You.
Hugh. Moved by Hugh, seconded by John. All those in favor, raise your hand. Say aye. Great. It's
Aye.
unanimous of the four of us that are here. The record should show that Ed Grumbine did leave the meeting about 2 minutes ago. The consent agenda for motion to approve following payments. March 15th, 2023, invoice 02671 for Carmichael and Clark for $2,430.50. Payment March 23rd, 2023, receipt from Robin Albro for the P.O. Box renewal for 6 months of $97, and payment for April 23rd, 2023 for invoice 307 from Richard Hartnell Inc. For $150 for technical service for Zoom hybrid meeting. Do I hear a motion and a second to pay the, who will pay those?
Move approval.
Moved by John. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Seconded. Okay.
Second by Hymas.
It was moved by Hugh.
Moved by Hugh. There we go. Moved by Hugh, seconded by Hymas. All those in further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous of the four that are present. Robin Albro will send an email to 3 board members right after the meeting, Frank, Hugh, and Robert, or Bob, and we'll respond by confirming with approval of paying the bills in written form so that we can make that decision a legally binding thing. Our next regular meeting will be May 24th at 6 p.m. The meeting will be held in Zoom as well as in person. The in-person will be at 1108 11th Street, Suite 303, above Fairhaven Bicycle. If the door is locked downstairs, call the number posted on the door and you will be let in. Anyone attending in-person meeting will be required to wear a well-fitting mask per the commissioners of Chuckanut Community Forest Park District as voted in their October 26, 2022 meeting.
Frank, I will be beyond phone or internet access for that meeting, so I will miss it.
All right, John, we'll miss you, and we appreciate you. And thanks for being here today. Is there other, Robin, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, there was just, I was going to talk about just briefly about the progress on the things to be done for dissolution.
Sure.
And I have come up with a list, and it's basically a lot of questions. And I have sent it to Bob, and he has stated that his office and I can work on that. I'll be back next week, and so I will start trying to answer all the questions that I can, and I will work with his office. I don't know if you have anything to add, Bob.
No, other than I do think we're going to need to work with the city to make this transition smooth. And some of the questions that you had, Robin, we're going to have to talk to the city about how is it going to work. For example, if you're working all the way up until the dissolution on trying to wrap something up, how do you get paid? And I would say you would get paid out of the assets of the district, but they may be held by the city by then. And
right.
We do need to talk with the city how that's going to work mechanically.
Yeah, and there are some bills that might need to paid at the last meeting, you know.
That's right. And
So,
city may have to be involved in, because they inherit the assets and the liabilities of the district.
So if you could both come prepared with that list at our next meeting, would that be adequate?
yeah,
Yep.
I think
What
so.
we need to do is develop a plan. We need to formalize a plan. Whether we have that plan in place by the next meeting or not, it's hard for me to guarantee that, because I think we need
Yeah.
to work with the city.
It would be great just to share the items in the plan with us so we can just know what's going on. So you just send a copy of it to us and give us an update the next meeting. That would be very useful.
Yeah.
And then anything we need to do to make it happen, hopefully we can clarify as well. Other information, Robin?
I can't think of any. I have to say, this is the nicest place I've ever been for a board meeting. That's the ocean behind me back there.
Oh,
So,
good.
Oh, don't tell us that. We're gonna come visit.
anytime. It's not my house, it's my friend's house.
We didn't really get a report from Christopher and Vince and Barbara, but is there anything you guys want to add about the efforts you've made to educate the community about what's going on?
Yeah, I could say that our meeting, our most recent one was with Happy Valley, and it went very smoothly, and there were good questions, and there was support, I think from the attendees of that neighborhood meeting. So, we did explain some of this. I think we tried to overcome some of the misinformation that had been out there earlier, and that the job was not done until this conservation easement is tied up, and the amended conservation easement is complete. So I think that took care of a lot of people's worry about, well, what do you mean you're not dissolved yet? We pay, we're done paying the money. That was the, word on the street for a while there. So I think we helped dissuade some of that.
Yes.
Yeah, the inaccurate information in the Cascade was unfortunate.
Yeah, it was unfortunate, and Ed's editorial was great, but I think the damage had already been done. And I am aware that a student at Western was soliciting interviewees, although she never did call me. So there's some kind of article going on in the
there actually isn't. I did talk to her. I gave her some information. She I think was very much swayed by the information in the Cascade.
Yeah. So I don't know.
She is not going to write an article about it. I don't.
Oh,
think.
good.
She collected a bunch of information, and I think, understands the issues more clearly now. And I don't think there's going to be an article. If it was, it would not be in the immediate future. It would be
okay.
months
Great.
away,
That's
probably.
good to know.
That's odd, because she interviewed me on Monday.
Yeah. No, I've talked to her even since Monday a couple times. Yeah.
Okay, good. So,
but she made it very clear she was not planning on publishing. It was for a class. It was not for publication. Okay. But she wanted the possibility of publishing it later on.
Okay. Well, good. I'm glad she talked to you guys.
Is that the same thing she told you, John?
No, wasn't clear if it was for the class or the class was associated with the Western Front. I thought it was the latter, but she didn't tell me anything about not publishing it.
Yeah, it's not for the Western Front. It's for a class, and if she did publish it, would probably be in the Western Front. I actually encourage her to go ahead and ask the Planet if they would publish it. I think it's a better place for it. It also has better graphics. But
the Planet has its own process, and it would require really a much bigger story.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Which will happen after a month. I mean, if you guys vote to accept the conservation easement or support the assignment, next month, then that will be a bigger story, I think.
But she's really a student. I mean, she's not a professional journalist at all. She's a student doing a project for a class.
Okay.
I spent several hours with her, and she actually read all the stuff I sent her. I was pleased.
Good. Good.
Hugh, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was expecting to approve his conservation easement tonight, and it's a shame that we didn't get it done because it's going to drag out in people's minds. And spring is here, and it would be good if we could get through it, because we got to get some signage up and get the parks people going on stuff.
Well, there's no reason
So
we
I hope we
can't.
can get it done next meeting, and I'm gonna hope we can, I'm gonna move it next meeting if we don't.
We don't have to wait for that to help the parks folks get signage up. We can offer
Oh,
to do that
really?
right now. Yeah.
They're gonna do it, huh? On their own?
They have a plan for it. They've got signs. They've got a whole process in place for it. So they may need help. I think they've got a plan to do it themselves, though. But we could volunteer right away. I think that's a great idea. So I think all of us, many of us may not have eaten dinner yet. My wife's called me 3 times just now, wondering where I was at. So I'd like to maybe adjourn the meeting. It is 8:37. We've gone a bit over our usual time frame. So I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Again, just noting that our next meeting will be May 24th at 6 p.m. See y'all then. Maybe.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
You.
Not everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night, Richard.
Night, Richard.
Night, y'all.